You go, looking good.
All right, my friends, I'm going to start with the definition. So I'm going to use these terms. I want to make sure that you know what I mean by them. So I talk about these two worlds, IT and the business user. You know what? Let me turn on my. All right. And in my mind, the business user is anybody who's on the front line, who's kind of in the trenches, and they need data. That's their ammunition, and they need data to make actionable decisions. IT, on the other hand, is everything which is kind of the framework, the supply lines, right? That keeps it running. Now, business user, they interpret the data, they understand it, they make decisions based off it. I mean, IT supports them in a big way, and depending on the partnership, they may be very involved, but typically they're not the ones interpreting the data. Now, I want to make sure that you don't get hung up on these terms, the names itself, because the titles and labels vary. For example, think about somebody in an IT help desk, and they're using data to make decisions. So in my mind, they're the business user, right? They are on the front lines. So I keep that in mind as I talk about I've worked on both sides of the aisle, and I know the challenges and pains of each. And I know what Power BI, the new world, the new technology can bring to each. Here's what you're going to learn by hanging out with me today. Right? We're going to see how we can leverage the strength and agility of Excel plus Power BI to overcome some of these challenges which are so prevalent. In fact, they're so prevalent that people don't even notice them. You don't even realize. So I'll tell a quick story. I walked into a local store. I live in Issaquah in the Northwest, close to Seattle, and they had the smoke detector. It was beeping. Once in a while, it would just go beep, beep. And I went a week later, and now there were two smoke detectors that were going beep, beep. And I walked up to the sales clerk and said, "Hey, doesn't that annoy you? Doesn't that beeping annoy you?" And he said, "What beeping?" Right? So that's what happens to us. I mean, we live in this life, and we kind of get immune to the pain. But I want to take that away, my friend. So I like to say that I was an above average, maybe an above average Excel user, but I became extraordinary when I discovered Power BI. And here is where it all began. So I had been a business analyst for quite a while now, but at some point I joined Microsoft. It was my first role in Microsoft, and I was so excited. And this was a really exciting group, the commerce transaction. They actually handled millions of transactions, money changing hands every day, Xbox transaction, all of that stuff. So there was a lot of data, and I just jumped in. I dove in. I really understood the domain. Payments is fascinating. And I built the scorecard. This was one of the first things I'd built. And man, everybody was so impressed. I was so happy. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. But that didn't last too long. Inevitably, they saw this and they loved it. But then they said, oh, Avi, can you throw this in? Can you throw that in? And as I layered those things on, it just seemed to get kind of worse and worse. I mean, it didn't scale with the size or the complexity. And I just went on this downward spiral where I wasn't as effective, as fast, as efficient anymore. Now, I stayed in that role for about 3 years, and I moved on to a different role. But something magical had happened right at the very end of role one, which is I discovered Power BI, and this was back in 2009. Now you must be thinking, Avi, what are you smoking? There was no Power BI in 2009. And let me tell you, my friend, there was Power BI, just in a different name. In fact, it didn't even have a name. It had a project code name. It was called Project Gemini. That became Power Pivot, which I like to call the firstborn in the Power BI family, because that really started it all. Right, so now it exists, that technology exists within Excel in terms of those add-ins, Power Pivot, Power Query. And of course, there's Power BI Desktop and there's PowerBI.com. But I take a shortcut and I just use the term Power BI to refer to that whole new wave of technology, so even the Excel side. But what happened in role two is armed with a combination of Excel and Power BI, it felt like I had both the strength and agility to keep scaling. I built something for my manager that, pretty soon was being used by my whole team. then I was building other things for other teams. I mean, they saw what we were doing, like, whoa, we want some of that. And it just grew from there. And before I knew it, I was running a BI platform for 600 plus users at that time. And I had checked in a year later, and I think it was up to like 1,000 users. Now, how does an Excel user, and that's how I still identify myself, go from, just being that humble old Excel user to building these large-scale BI systems? Gosh, it was phenomenal. It felt like I had a secret. So I left my job at Microsoft because I wanted to share that secret and I wanted to spread the word. But what I found out there wasn't good news, because that boom and bust cycle that I had seen, I had gone through, I saw it everywhere. I mean, small companies or large, gosh, all of them built something, kind of stopped working, eventually tore it down, right, over time. And unfortunately, this was repeated over time. So, you watch a group or hear them tell stories about what happened last year or 3 years ago, and they're being in this boom and bust cycle. And business wasn't the only culprit. IT was equally guilty, if not more so. I mean, they had their cycles as well, boom and bust. They were just longer and way more costly. I think millions of dollars. So that's been my obsession, to break companies and organizations and people out of that boom-bust cycle. And you can say that I do that because I know that once an individual steps out of it, they become a lot more productive. And of course, imagine if even 10% of your population, 10% of your employees are working in that manner, where they're broken out of that cycle and are empowered to push it to the limits that they can, it really can turn around a whole organization as well. But those are not the real reasons why I do this. The real reason is this one right here. And this is very personal to me, because I know when I was stuck in that cycle, gosh, I was frustrated. I was not happy. And it felt like gut-wrenching, soul-sucking work. So my goal is to rescue those souls. My goal is to rescue those people who feel stuck in that boom and bust cycle. So that's what my LinkedIn profile says. But at this point, if you're thinking, oh gosh, that's great, but that's Avi. Let me tell you, I'm no data whiz, just an Excel user. And I think I'm the living testament that if I can do it, you can too. So let's talk about Power BI and Excel. So 5 lessons to unlearn. We're going to go through each. But before that, I wanted to go through another top 5 list. And these are 5 signs that I can now look back and see. At that time, I didn't quite recognize them, but now I know these signs. And these are the signs that scream that, hey, you need help. So the first one, again, this is what I lived. The first one, I scheduled my vacation around the refresh days. Oh, no, not the first week of May. That's when I'm running the report refresh. Can't go then. This is what my report names look like. Version 1 point something something. Gosh, I don't know how many versions were floating around. And in a meeting, when my data was up there on a PowerPoint slide, of course, and somebody said, oh gosh, that data doesn't look right, my heart just sank. Because, I was thinking, oh damn, there goes my weekend. I'll be unraveling the spaghetti of my sheets and formulas and trying to dig through and see what's wrong. Or maybe there's nothing wrong. It was so hard to tell. And lastly, well, not last, but number 4, when I left the group, the fancy report that I showed you, I was so proud of that. That just mysteriously died. I checked back with my colleagues, like, yeah, we're not using that report anymore. And I just wondered why. And really odd, when I joined my new group, I inherited a set of Excel reports where I'm like, hey, who the heck built this? And I tried everything in my power to kill it. So hey, let me ask you if you have lived any of these. So just type in the chat window 1 or 5 or whichever number you've lived through, or if you have one of your own signs to contribute. That'd be pretty cool. Okay, I see a 5 from Kristen. All of the above. Okay, great. Wow, we have a lot to talk about. Oh, 3, all 1 to 5 in infinity. Love it. Yeah. Oh gosh, living through that now. 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, all right. So you guys, thank you for making me feel like I am not alone. So I'm getting a lot of 5s and 2 and 5 and so forth, but all of you saying, yeah, these are problems all the time. Get it, totally get it. So let's step through it. So number one, and we're going to talk about the old habit, kind of the old world, and we're going to talk about, hey, what's possible in the new world. And really some of it, yeah, let's just walk through. So the first one is you always have to combine data from multiple places. That's a reality. That's certainly the reality for business users. Certainly happens in IT, but here's what I think happens. IT, in spite of the best of their efforts, they will get the business user kind of 80% there, maybe 95% there, but not all the way there. I think business is just too nimble, too fast. They're doing a lot of things ad hoc. So the last mile, the business user always have to walk alone, and that proves to be the hardest. So there's always a lot of combining data together, and if it ends up being 1,001 manual steps or even 10 manual steps, it's painful. And again, you may not realize that pain. Well, you would once it goes away. So let's go into a demo, and we're going to pick it up here. And I'm showing it in Power BI Desktop, but again, as I talked about in the beginning, these tools, this functionality exists in Excel as well as Power BI. In Excel, you have the add-ins, Power Pivot and Power Query. In Power BI Desktop, it's just kind of query and data model. All right, so I don't have any data. If you've never seen Power BI Desktop here, it starts off kind of intimidating, like, what am I looking at? Don't worry. The first thing you do is get data. Right, so that's the fuel. You need to feed it. So I'm going to say get data, and there are tons of options of data sources you can connect to. Okay, why is it taking that long? Oh, there we go. All right, so there's a long list to the point where, gosh, they needed a search box here, so you can search for something as well. So that's terrific. And we're just going to role play. I'm going to connect to sources which I can easily use for a demo. But again, I mean, you can connect to all of this. And even if the data source you're connecting to or you want to connect to is not there, often you can connect to it either using, I don't know, like an XML feed or an OData feed that's available, or a generic ODBC driver. It supports that as well. So even if you don't find that name on this list, you still might be able to connect to it. And of course, the last resort is you export data from whichever system and then consume it in. But we're going to start with an access file, and I'm going to just go with this one right here. And this one, let's pretend, is being supplied by IT. So I'm a business user, and this one is clean. They've already cleaned it up. Actually, even if you're connecting to IT, you would need to make some changes sometimes. But in our scenario, we're just going to connect to the data source, and once you connect, it shows you what all is available there. And for now, I'm just going to click Load. So notice what happens here. It actually goes out there and gets a copy of the data, and it gets saved. When I'm going to save this file, it's going to be saved as part of that file. So notice you got all these new tables over here. Perfect. And now let me point out these 3 tabs over here. The first is the reporting tab, the next one is the data, and the last one is relationships. So if you go there, if I click on data, you can see the actual table that was brought in: calendar, customer, product, sales, and the relationship view. But really what I wanted to talk about was the trouble we have when we combine data from multiple sources. And here is the reality. Real data is messy. It's super messy. Well, yeah, it is messy, right? So it never looks like that. It never looks like, oh, you connect, bring it in, and boom, you're done. Oh gosh, if you're living in that land, it's not going to last long. Let me just say that. So this is what real data looks like. So I'm just going to go back here, and in this scenario, again, we're just role playing. So we have this data we need to bring in, and this is what I call human-friendly data. Now it's got this nice color coding, which is pretty useless to machines. It's got these subtotals and grand total. I'm like, nah. As long as I have these numbers, I can calculate the subtotals. That's what a machine would say. So these are redundant. They don't need that. And of course, there's these nice header rows up top. And this is just an example. It could be much worse than this. But we're stuck with having to bring that data in. So let me show you, let me step you through that example. So I'm going to point to that Excel file, and this time I'm going to select that sheet and I'm going to click Edit. Now what it's going to do is it's actually going to launch a new window called the Query Editor. And it popped up on a different screen. Great. So you notice I have the Query Editor, and in the back I have my regular Power BI desktop. So Query Editor is really cool. First of all, 95% of what I do is click around in the ribbon, and I love that. I'm so used to the ribbon, having worked with Office ribbons for so long. I'm like, yeah, cool. I get ribbons. You click through and so there, perfect. So and it shows you the queries. We're on the budget query right now. It shows you how the data would be loaded right now. It shows you the name, and ooh, my favorite, I want you to keep a close eye on this part. Okay, so let's look at this data. It's really messy. So I'm going to, again, click around on some buttons in the ribbon. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of these rows, these top 3 rows. They're just header rows. I don't need them. Well, guess what? There's a button to do just that. Remove rows, remove top rows, and let's say get rid of 3 rows. Great. You can even say a dynamic number of rows. You can have it automatically determined. I'll save that for the Q&A if somebody's curious about that. Great. So you notice what happened. The rows are gone. They're not seen here anymore. And most importantly, a step was recorded right here. Remove top rows. Let's keep going. Now I want the first row to be the header. There's a button for that. Boom. Click. Done. And recorded right here. Promoted headers. Let's see what else. I want to get rid of these subtotal rows because I don't want that to be double counted. I can figure out the total and subtotals later on. So I'm going to say filter, text filter does not contain the word total. Hit OK. Totals are gone. Step is recorded. I'm going to scoot over here, get rid of my grand total column. Again, there's a button for that. Remove columns. Perfect. Done. All right, now to my favorite part. So now we see we have the budget data spread across these columns. Now this is a very clumsy shape for machines, because if I tell the data model, Power BI engine later, to say, hey, just give me the total budget, what is it? What you have to do is you have to say, oh, go and sum January and February and March, and it's just clumsy. Instead, what I would like is that for that data to be in rows instead of columns. And that action is called unpivot. And I was so proud in that whole world that I even knew that term. And I also knew how to do it. I knew the SQL unpivot command. But what I had to do was I had to load the table, Excel table in SQL, run the unpivot command, and every time I had to crack open my SQL book, look up the syntax, and bring it back in Excel once it was done. Once I saw how to do it here, I almost cried because, yeah, you guessed it, there's a button for that. So I selected all those columns, and my friends, there it is, the unpivot columns, and notice what happens if I click here, boom, the months are in rows now, so the unpivot is done. That's it, just one button. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit. I'm going to call it month, and again, each step, even the rename is recorded there. I'm going to record that. I'm going to change the data type, and that's it. I'm done. And now I can hit close and apply. And all these steps are going to be played out. By the way, what you were seeing in the query editor window was a preview. It doesn't load the whole data set, obviously, because you could be working with 1,000,000 or hundreds of millions of rows. But once you hit close and apply, it loads whatever table. Unless you had filtered it, it's going to load the whole table. So that's it. My table is ready to use. But I want to go back to the query editor and just, wallow in the awesomeness of this. So a few things. When you see this, steps being recorded, does it remind you of maybe an Excel feature which works similarly? Yes, so, Yeji, unpivot brings the columns into rows. All right, great. So yeah, so this recording of steps, that hey, I click around and all those steps get recorded. What does that remind you of, guys? Something in Excel. Yeah, of course, macro. Okay, great. Yep. But this is so much more awesome than macro because in macros, this is how I use macros. I recorded the macro, great. And as long as that is exactly how I wanted to play it back, it was easy. I just said play macro and done. But as soon as I needed to make a change, gosh, I had to hit Alt F11 and then I was staring at all this VBA code. And maybe an hour or two of Googling later, I would accomplish the tweak that I wanted to make. In here, the recording and the editing interface is exactly the same. Even if you wanted to edit something, let's say I want to insert a step here, I can just click on the button and it'll say, yeah, you want to insert a step? Yeah, I do, right? So editing is the same. You can again click on these buttons to delete a step if you don't want it anymore, or to change one of these steps. Example, remove top rows, and like, you can just click on the gear icon right here and it brings that back up. So again, editing is the same as recording. It's not that difficult. Right, so that's great. And another thing that I love is it's self-documenting. I mean, frankly, I hated documentation around my reports, but I know it was important not just for me to be able to hand it off to other people, but if I brought the thing up and a month later and I was debugging something or running a refresh again and it was breaking, for me to be able to debug it. Here, all of these steps are recorded and you can step through them later on and understand what was done, and if something is broken, fix it right there. So I am totally in love with this, and that's pretty much all I use. I mean, that's my go-to way of bringing in data to my data model. So let's bring it back here. So my friends, if you saw that you can connect to multiple sources, and yeah, I showed you the long list, and not just two, you can connect to 4 or 5 different sources, and each one of those, again, real data is messy, so for each one of those sources, you might have to record these steps in the query editor where you clean, shape, and transform, and yeah, do it that way. So Christina has a question, can you reorder the steps? Not drag and drop. That would be nice. That's a pretty cool feature request, I think. But yeah, you can insert a step and delete the old one, so you can kind of reorder it that way. And of course, what that gets you is that now you're not doing that 1001 manual steps, copy, paste, whatever transformation. You're either clicking that one button to refresh and replay everything. It's going to connect to your sources, replay all the steps that you recorded, and bring you the data, or you can even set up auto refresh. I'll save auto refresh for the Q&A if somebody has questions about that. Self-documenting, easy to edit and fix. All right, let's look at the next one, endless formulas. So I'm going to share a screenshot, and this is from a real report, and we started working with this client, and the goal was to bring them to the new world. So we started off by looking at their existing reports. So this is the first report that I opened, and my heart just sank as soon as I clicked on the first cell there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I'm like, okay, Avi, easy breaths, easy breaths. It's okay, it's just a sum, just a sum. But my panic sprung up again when I clicked on that first cell, N17, as you can see here. Guess what that was? It was another formula, of course, and that's how we build Excel files and reports, right? I mean, it's a spaghetti of formulas. It's a maze. What if things could be different? So let's go back to our file, and I'm going to do what chefs do, which is I put my last Power BI file into the oven, took it out after 20 minutes, and here's what came out. So I've jumped a few steps, but I'm going to quickly talk about them. So what I've done here is set up all the relationship between tables. And these are pretty cool. The quick way to describe them is that they're the end of VLOOKUPs. So whatever you did in VLOOKUP, you don't have to do that anymore. All you have to do is just establish a relationship between these two tables. But what I want to talk about are the formulas. So let's see here. So we have a very simple formula defined for us right here as sales. So if I zoom in on that, you can see that it looks very simple. And I love that when I moved from Excel to the Power BI world. Yes, Jenny, you can edit established relationships. Licensing costs, great question. We'll talk about that in the Q&A. Bring it up again. But here, back on the measures, so yeah, it's really simple. So I loved it because as an Excel user, I stepped in, and a lot of formulas were similar to Excel. They had similar signature. I'm like, yeah, I know what sum is. I know what max, min, average is. So a lot of that are very easy. Of course, what I didn't have a clue then is that it starts off easy, but has unlimited capabilities. It's crazy what things you can do with this formula language. It's called DAX, by the way. Right, but yeah, so this is my first formula. But the scenario here is we have been asked, let's say I've been asked by my manager to show a comparison of year-over-year sales growth by month, right? So I just want sales, and I want sales prior year. And for that, we're going to define a new measure. So for that, I'm going to go to modeling, and I'm going to click this button here, new measure. Great. Measures, think of them as formulas in this new world, but way more awesome, and we'll talk about that in a second. So I'll say sales prior year. Great. And I'm going to use, it has, again, lots of depth, so I'm going to use one of the many functions available, calculate. And this is what calculate lets me do. Calculate lets me say, yeah, go ahead and calculate sales, but then I can alter the way it's being calculated. And in this case, I'm going to use another time intelligence functions, and I'll say same period last year. Just calculate sales, but for the period last year. And for this one, you need to pass in your date column. And don't get too hung up on the syntax, right? Because what I want to show you is something different. So sales prior year, just see that, hey, it's not that complicated. It's a simple formula. Great. And let's just fix the formatting, currency. Great. And we have the formula defined, and I'm going to put that on our pivot. So sales prior year. Great. Now, first of all, let's see if it's even working. So I'm in 2016, and notice if for January, it's saying, for the prior year, 2015, the sales were 500K. And if I click back in 2015, boom, indeed, the sales were 500K. So yeah, it's working, but this is the magical part. So inevitably, as soon as you show this to your manager, he says, or whatever the audience is, right? They say, great, but, right? There's always a but, because that's how humans work. They see something and they're like, yeah, this is cool. I wonder if you could do this. And the unfortunate part is that we have almost discouraged that behavior. I'm like, no, this is what you get, man. Yeah, it's going to take me a while. But now, if somebody says, yeah, but can you show it to me by product subcategory or something, or customer, some attributes. So let's try it. So actually, I'm going to change this to a graph as well, just to make things fun. And say, oh, okay, yeah, you want to see it by, maybe customer occupation. Great, let's do that. There we go. Now you can say, okay, what about skilled manual or professional or so forth? How about we do it based on something else, maybe by sales country. Right? Yeah, sure, you can do that. Or maybe you want to see it's side by side by country. And again, I'm just dragging and dropping. And let's change this to a graph. But hey, here's what happened here. Now think about it and compare it to the old Excel world. The old Excel, not the new Excel with the Power Pivot and cool stuff. I didn't touch the formula. I didn't touch the formula at all. I didn't rewrite it, right? I mean, and in fact, if you look at the formula, it said nothing at all about, oh, is this a sales prior year being shown by month, by customer occupation, by territory country? No, it's just a simple formula. But what you have is define once, use everywhere. Gosh, yeah, so, yeah, that's so cool. I'll just quickly do a map. Ooh, yeah. Yep, it does do maps. There was a question there. So yeah, define once, use everywhere, as opposed to Excel, where if you built a comparison, if you had built this table right here in Excel, and then somebody said, yeah, I want it to be blown up by occupation or country or something else, you almost have to start from scratch because every report is kind of custom built. Every formula kind of is this guy. And now we have an opportunity to go from that to define once used everywhere. That is so cool. There's a tip, though, that I want to share, which is that you notice how easy it was. I mean, once you build the data model, once you have the data in, you have your measures defined, all of that, if somebody says, oh, can you do it this way? Most likely it's just going to be 1 or 2 mouse clicks for you. But I want to institute a mandatory waiting period of 30 minutes. So you go back to your desk, do those 2 mouse clicks, and I don't know, grab a coffee, watch some cute kittens video on YouTube. You've deserved the break. You've earned it, right? And after 30 minutes, go back to them saying, you know, maybe panting like, oh man, that was tough, but I got it done, right? So preserve some mystique in the whole process. All right, perfect. Okay, now this one is big. In fact, I'm going to start with a story here. The story of the MP4. So I want all of you to kind of close your eyes. Well, actually, don't close your eyes. You won't see my slides. But imagine a world where there was no YouTube video, not even Facebook video, and not even social. Wait, social is actually dead. It was one of the Microsoft platforms. But anyway, you get my point. There was no platform for sharing video, right? And you were back to MP4. So I had a video of my daughter, and I wanted to send it to my parents in India. And how am I going to do it? Gosh, I have to get the MP4 to them somehow. Now, if that feels clumsy, it's because it is, right? I mean, the new world is way more awesome. Yeah, I mean, you put it up on YouTube, and anybody, well, who has access at least, or if you make it public, they can consume it on a device of their choice whenever they want. That's how it should work. But my friends, similar to the MP4, we've been living in this .xlsx, or I hope not the .bbix world. That has to stop because there's such a better alternative. We need the same thing that we have for YouTube. We need a platform where we can publish them. And we do have that. I think this is in order. Maybe I should show this first. So what we have, so the new world that I'm talking about is this. There are 3 phases in there: author, publish, and consume. So you can author your data model in a tool of your choice. You can pick either Excel and use the add-ins, Power Pivot or Power Query, all of those are there. Or you can use Power BI Desktop, or if you're one of those fancy schmancy ones, you can be developing in Visual Studio for SSAS. And the next step is you're going to publish it. Yeah, you're not going to share that XLSX or PBIX file. Believe me, I mean, it's as archaic as sharing MP4s. So you're going to publish it. Now you can publish it to the cloud, powerbi.com, but there are on-premises publishing options as well. We can talk more about that in the Q&A. But yeah, you publish it to a spot, and that becomes the single source of truth. That drives all of your reporting in the reporting tool of your choice. It could be Power BI dashboards and reports, or you can connect an Excel pivot table and build Excel reports from that same source. Or you can build SSRS or God knows what, right? You can connect a whole bunch of stuff. Visualization, the report part, becomes the easy part. I mean, you saw me. It's like a kid in a candy store filling his shopping cart. I mean, you go through your measures and, oh, yeah, I want this. I want a sales by customer occupation. Yeah, show me sales year over year. Because all the hard work has been done. In the query editor, where you kind of cleaned, shaped, transformed data to bring it in, and then in the model where you define the relationships and most of all your measures. That's the heart of it. So yeah, this part is easy. So I want to show a quick video and let's see how it works. So what I have here, what I'm going to show you is a video which shows on the left side an Excel model. There we go. Hold on, let me grab it. An Excel model, and on the right side it shows a Power BI model. And I'm going to publish both of them, in this case to powerbi.com, and then I'm going to create the reports off of it, a Power BI report and an Excel report, right? So I go through kind of this publish and consume cycle. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear me while this video is playing, but it's a 2-minute video, so just watch. Again, I'm going to publish. On the left, you're going to see an Excel model using Power Pivot and Power Query. On the right, you're going to see a Power BI desktop, and I'm going to publish and create reports in both Power BI and Excel. Great. I don't think that worked.
Nope, not seeing anything yet. You might just have to play the one from your desktop.
Okay.
I suppose we won't get audio then.
All right, no worries. Let's see, that's odd. It does say stop the video, which is weird. Okay, let's come back to my screen. Okay, you guys can see my screen. All right, I'm just going to play the video, and we'll see how that goes. So again, on the left, you have an Excel model, and you can see how similar they look. On the right, you have the Power BI desktop. So that's a great part, that a lot of these things are very transferable. You learn them in one tool, doesn't matter what, and you can take it to the other one. All right, so again, I'm showing the kind of the query editor in both an Excel and Power BI desktop. You see how I like the look. Now I have the model ready, and I'm going to go on PowerBI.com and just connect to that file. So I'm going to say, yep, on the left, I connect to Excel. On the right, I connect to Power BI desktop file. And now it's being published, and now both of them are online. And once they're online, if you click on them, you can create a Power BI report. So I'm going to do just that. And again, it's just drag and drop from the field list. I feel like a kid in the playground. Yeah, it's just a quick report. And yeah, so reporting becomes easy. And when I think about it, I still feel amazed. Like, wow, what a world. I mean, 80% of my time was just spent tinkering on the reports. Now, as long as you focus on the data model and do it right, reporting is the easy part. Perfect. So now I have this Power BI report, and now I'm going to show you how it works in Excel. So to analyze in Excel, if you just click on the data set, there's this Analyze in Excel button right there, and that lets you open an Excel pivot table which is connected to the model in the cloud. Again, it's all about that single source of truth. You don't want multiple versions of things floating around. Once you've published it, that becomes a single source of truth. So how cool is this? I have an Excel file, and I can do whatever I can do in Excel. And that's the cool part. With this new tool, Power BI, if you have, I don't know, tens of years of Excel experience, you don't have to throw all of it away. You can still use all of it. And I just wanted to emphasize one thing, that the model, that originally model that I loaded up, was about 4 megabytes. But the report is really thin, because the report is simply connecting back to that single source of truth. It doesn't have all the data. So for all you care, your model could be 250 megabytes or bigger. I don't know, right? Go crazy. And your reports are still going to be kind of lightweight. All right, I think that's about it. Okay, great. So hopefully that gives you an idea. And if that made sense, if that made sense, then the number 4 and number 5 on my list are easy. They're free, in fact. You're going to get them instantly. So this is number 4. You spend hours trying to create effective reports, and here's what we found. What we found was, I remember my first Power BI project, we went into a finance team, and they had a lot of Excel reports, and we said, oh, yeah, we're going to change it all to Power BI. And now, when I look back, I'm like, wow, how incredibly stupid was I? Because it doesn't work that way. I mean, Power BI is great. It's terrific. It's just mind-blowing for so many scenarios. It builds these rich, fully interactive, mobile-ready reports. But I know those finance people, gosh, they needed to dive into the data at times. Oh, find that, $1,300.50, whatever, offset that happened 3 months ago. And for that, Excel was certainly the go-to tool. And of course, Excel has its own set of capabilities, ultimately flexible. So every single client I've worked with, we have ended up with a combo of Power BI and Excel, Power BI and Excel for the reporting layer. And really, it doesn't matter. You could pick other tools. I know you can connect SSRS. Heck, if you tried hard enough, I'm sure you could connect some non-Microsoft tools to it, right? But the key that makes it all work is that it's fed from a single source of truth. It has to start there. And then you use the reporting tool of your choice, the reporting tool that makes the best sense for your scenario. That's the easiest to use. All right. Number 5, be the data bottleneck. And I remember being in that role, data analyst, where it just felt like I was getting inundated by requests, right? I mean, I would put in a long day, and at the end of the day, it just felt like my to-do list was longer than what I started with. How can that be? And I realized that the way out of it is you empower others. So you don't just lift yourself up with these tools. Once you have this set up, don't be the person who's doing all of it, right? Who's doing, author, publish, and building all the reports, making all the changes. And the part where you can collaborate the easiest is the reporting side. So there, once you're at that point, it's going to be your job to educate others. I mean, do brown bags, do lunch and learn, do Q&A, office hours, whatever it takes, and say, hey, I have the model published, and this is all you have to do. I mean, I have some basic reports, but I can't meet all of your needs. So yeah, you walk that last mile, but now it's easy because I've done the heavy lifting for you. I've done the data cleanup, defining all the measures. Everything is done. You just pick a tool of your choice, Power BI, Excel, or something else, and yeah, just go ahead and build your report. So help them, so that way you're not the data bottleneck, you're not part of the problem, you're not everybody is kind of stopping on, and you're part of the solution. You're empowering others to do it. And again, if you got that whole publish model in number 3, you're going to get this. So Stephen Covey gave you 7. I'm going to give you 5. So indeed, yeah, use the magic of the query editor to connect to multiple data sources and clean shape and transform your data. Use the magic of measures for define once, use everywhere. Man, I mean, if you would have said those words to, I don't know, me before 2009, I would have cracked up and laughed. Like, get out of here. I mean, you're joking. But now I've seen that, right? Let your data model be the single source of truth. Use the reporting tool of your choice. And hey, be a data hero. Enable others. Now, the goal of this talk is anybody who's sitting on the fence or just eyeing this thing like, oh yeah, I've kind of heard about Power BI. I've seen some good demos and such. I want you to get going. I want you to really get into this world and embrace these new tools because I really feel that Power BI and Excel rock together. So I don't want to leave any excuse for you for that. So that was my goal for this talk. But I also want to give you a step-by-step. Right? So, okay, Avi, I get the vision. I want to get there, but how do I get started? Like, what's the first step? So for that, if you go to this URL, avisingh.com/bonus, you can get access to my training module. So what this is actually the first module of the complete training course that I teach. So the first module takes you zero dashboard because I want all my students to experience the full spectrum, that author, publish, consume, the whole cycle, get familiar with it. And then we have additional modules, of course, in the training class itself, which focus on the query editor, which focus on the formulas, which focus on the platform and the visualizations. But the first one is pretty cool, 2 hours of video, so that's going to have step-by-step. Just go to this URL and get that. So, folks, hey, I know you had some great questions. I tried to get to some of it, but let's come back. So let's talk about, I think, something that floated by, which was licensing. Let me just answer that, and then Boris, Dan, maybe you can help me curate the question. So let me talk about licensing. So of course, Power BI Desktop is free. PowerBI.com, if you go online, that sign up is free, although you need what they call a work email address. What that means is Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, that sort of stuff is not going to work. Outlook.com doesn't work either, I think, even though Outlook.com can be a paid one. Right, so that one is free as well, but it does have a pro option. So I think the term is freemium, similar to how Dropbox and other services work. So you get free up to a certain limit, and after that it's paid. But the limits in PowerBI.com are very generous, and here's what I'll share. when I'm working with my clients, I try to keep them running on the free version for as long as I can, not because I'm trying to cheat Microsoft off of the revenue, but I know that as soon as the money discussion comes in, that becomes a bottleneck, right? That becomes a stopping with, oh no, now we got to get approval or something like that. So yeah, so I want to avoid that, and I want to slowly roll in the friendly Trojan horse, right? Uh, not the deadly one, but this friendly Trojan horse in the organization, and then and once they see the value, say, oh yeah, we see it, then it's a no-brainer. When you're ready, when you've seen the value, then the Power BI Pro license, $10 per user per month, you're gonna be like, yeah, oh gosh, that's the best money we're ever gonna spend. Okay, so
I
let's go
can
here.
ask you some questions if you want.
Yeah.
So one of the ones that came up, and I think I know the answer, but so we have all the Power BI features in Excel, and we've been using those. So why would we want to use Power BI instead of those stuff in Excel? What's the big benefit of using the Power BI over Excel?
Good point. So, yeah, I wish Microsoft would start using my terminology, but I always differentiate between the Power BI desktop and PowerBI.com. So if you are happily using Excel, really there's no reason to use Power BI desktop. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some minor reasons, but by all means, if you're happy with this, stick with it. But there's no equivalent in Excel of this one over here. So the easiest path to publish is PowerBI.com, and that gives you a lot of these capabilities. It gives you the Power BI dashboard, rich, interactive, mobile-ready, all of that stuff, and you can still connect to Excel. So that's what Excel doesn't quite provide. I mean, there are some. I mean, you can publish it, sure, like you can publish it to SharePoint Online or something like that, but that doesn't give you this. So there, Excel doesn't have an equivalent. And of course, there are on-prem publish options as well. So that's yeah. What do you think, Dan? Did I kind of answer that? Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean the one big thing about the Power BI and the reason that they kind of removed it from Excel was because they want to increase the release cycles too, so that they could add new features and capabilities without having to wait for, the next version of Excel to come out.
Yeah, that's a good point. So typically what I say is that if you're not like some people, of course, a lot of people I talk to are like really in Excel. So for them, I feel it's an easier start to just start off there. But I'm like, hey, if you're not married to Excel, just go ahead and try Power BI Desktop. So hey, either is good. Really, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care because once you publish it, nobody knows, nobody cares. And once you've published it, it's a single source of truth. Then your users don't know where it came from. Your reports don't really know where it came from. So yeah, it's all good. You can use the one that works best for you. Okay, what else? What
So
else?
someone was wondering, could you recommend any sources or places where they can learn the DAX language?
Uh, Yeah, there are tons of sources. So, of course, I teach a training class as well, and I'm pretty sure you can find a lot of training online. So there's a lot of free training if you want to start off with that. So, of course, my training is paid outside of this free module, but there are courses on edX, which I would highly recommend. So just go ahead and search on edX for that. Those are a good start. Of course, if you go to PowerBI.com, I think there's a Learn link, which has a lot of resources as well. Those would be good places to start.
I think there's a good book too.
Yeah, so if you go.
So someone was wondering, you already kind of explained that one. Well, what about VBA? Does Power BI support VBA customization at all?
Good point. So yeah, you can go check out my book as well. VBA customization. So if you are building your models in Excel, you're using Excel and using Power Pivot and Power Query, there is, I would say, limited VBA capability. I think you can do some things, but you cannot do other things. You should look into that. But as far as I know, if you're not in the Excel world, you're kind of Power BI desktop, of course. Can you programmatically build the model or change it? I don't believe so. Of course, the next level of option is if you're using Visual Studio, then I think you might have more options. But in Excel world, there are limited things you can do in VBA. You might be able to add a table, add a measure, things like that, and do it programmatically. That would be pretty hardcore, though. I haven't really found, actually, I don't know. So some of the models that I end up with, sometimes they have hundreds of measures, and then I have used VBA in that case. So if I had a similar pattern, like I built sales, sales prior year, sales year over year, sales year over percentage change, and then I want to do it for budget, for cost, and something, instead of writing those down, I use a VBA script to just create them. So I have used it occasionally, not too much though.
Okay, someone was wondering about how would they share or integrate this with their SharePoint?
Okay. Boy, I feel like there's something recent that happened. SharePoint. Oh gosh. So Dan, help me out. Didn't they announce something? That's the thing about this. It changes so fast. I thought they announced something about SharePoint integration.
I think with SharePoint Online, there's capabilities now where you can have, there's like
Yeah.
a web part or an add-in to reference the Power BI, but there are some embed options. It's like you could embed in a web page, so that might work in SharePoint.
Yeah, so look for that first. SharePoint, there are ways I know that you can just embed a Power BI report, but the integrated Power BI report in SharePoint Online, I mean, they're looking for a deeper integration as well. That might be in preview, might have already happened. Gosh, they move so fast, it's hard to keep track. So look for those two. You can embed that in SharePoint. Mm, Although, of course, the premium experience is PowerBI.com. So I didn't get a chance to show all that, but it has a lot of the rich functionality. There's a natural language Q&A and all that sort of stuff. So sometimes if you have had an existing SharePoint site, you just put a link on there saying, hey, here, find your Power BI reports here. Or you can also deep link to specific Power BI reports. So that works. Of course, embedding is an option too. I think that's the best I have.
Someone is just wondering if you can flip back to the slide that shows the 5 lessons to unlearn.
Yep, and that should be in the copy of the email as well. Let's go to this one though. Oh, sorry, not the email, the invite.
And then the other big one that you hear from everyone is how can we publish this to on-premise?
Of course, yeah, I kind of left that hanging and it's like, hey, single source of truth, PowerBI.com, but as soon as I utter those words in a lot of settings, they're like, oh no, we can't be in the cloud. Actually, before I answer that, I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. So, and I always do in person as well. I'm like, why not cloud? And then I kind of quiz them, like, I mean, do you guys use Salesforce? And a lot of companies do. That's in the cloud. And then I ask them, where does your email live? And usually they have no idea, but I say that, hey, for a lot of companies, they have moved off of Exchange on premises and they have moved to Exchange Online. That's in the cloud. And really, what's more sensitive than email? I mean, it's got a lot of our dirty secrets and skeletons, right? So, so a lot of stuff is in the cloud. So I kind of question the point that you can't put the stuff in cloud. But hey, it's okay. I know you got red tape and all that stuff. So the on-premise options, there are two, I think. One, which is really recent, is let's see, go back to this guy, is SSRS CTP Power BI. So this is in preview, but the idea is that you can have an on-premises SQL Server reporting server where you can publish your Power BI reports. Now, the last I checked, this wasn't as full-fledged as PowerBI.com. For instance, at that point, you can publish Power BI reports, but you are not going to have what are kind of the PowerBI.com dashboards. There was no equivalent of that. Maybe there was no Q&A and things like that. But it's a preview. It's just getting started. That's one option. Another option, which has been there for a long, long time, is actually one of my very favorite options, and I'll tell you why, is SQL Server Analysis Services, SSAS, and you need the tabular version. That's the cool one. I don't care about the other one. So SSAS Tabular, and you can publish your models there as well. And I'll say why I love this one, because I remember, so I'm an Excel user at heart, and I remember once I was struggling with trying to set up SharePoint, and it was such a nightmare. and then I stumbled on this and I installed it, and this was like 30 minutes or less. So yeah, this was really easy to set up and use. So those are your two options to kind of publish it on site, SSAS, and you can publish Power BI reports on SSRS.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up our time for today. There's still quite a few other questions. I can definitely send those to you, Avi, and if you want to do follow up with any of those, maybe in a blog post or something like that, give you that opportunity. I know a lot of people are wondering about how can they refresh, like I've got a monthly report and I need to
Mhm.
refresh the data every month. How do I go about doing that?
Yeah, all right. Hey, I'll point out to another resource if you do have more questions for me. I've been doing this session on Fridays at 9 a.m. So just go to talkpowerbi.com, and the session has no presentation. All I do is Q&A. So just, you come in, and there I have the facility to unmute you. So yeah, we just have a conversation. I just unmute one of the callers, and you just get to ask a question. Some users have even kind of shared their screen and shown me the models. So I have a little more flexibility there. So yeah, join that. That runs on Fridays, 9 a.m. talkpowerbi.com. But yeah, Dan, thanks. If you could send me the transcript, maybe I'll try to answer them on a blog post or something like that.
Yes, definitely. Well, I want to thank you so much for Avi for taking the time to present to our community. We're getting tons of great feedback, lots of great questions and interactions. Love to see that. Appreciate your time. Do you have any last bits of advice or tips? Any words of wisdom that you want to give the community before we sign off?
Yeah, I'll just leave you with a quote, which is, in a year from now, you would have wished you started today. So don't let that be you. Yeah, get started, get going. That's the key thing.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending. Loved all the participation. Look forward to the next meeting presentation for next month. We've got a couple more great presentations coming up, and we'll get this video recording up on our YouTube channel later today. And once again, thanks Avi for presenting. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, yeah, and Dan, hey, quick thank you to you and SQL Pass BA for hosting me today.
Definitely, anytime. Love to have you back.